When my husband served me divorce papers at my office, he thought I would cry. Instead, I walked back to my desk, sat down in my ergonomic chair, and opened a brand new spreadsheet. At the time, I still believed that what we were going through had started with money. I thought if I traced the numbers carefully enough, I would find the place where things went wrong and maybe understand how to fix them. That instinct had guided most of my life. Problems, to me, were systems. Systems could be repaired. Ethan's restaurant had been struggling for nearly 2 years. He co-owned a trendy little place on the edge of downtown Denver, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood, the kind of spot food bloggers loved when it first opened. The margins were thin, the rent was brutal, and every month seemed to bring a new emergency. Equipment repairs, supplier delays, payroll shortfalls. He came home exhausted and defensive, the smell of fryer oil clinging to his clothes. I worked as a financial analyst at a mid-sized insurance company downtown. Open plan office, glass conference rooms, break room conversations that always circled back to interest rates and layoffs. My job trained me to see patterns, to anticipate risk before it turned into loss. At home, though, I ignored every red flag because I believed being a good wife meant absorbing stress quietly. Ethan hated talking about money with me. He said it made him feel small. He said I thought in spreadsheets instead of feelings. I tried to compensate by staying calm, by reassuring him that rough patches were normal. When he finally admitted the restaurant still carried $92,000 in high-interest business debt, I didn't panic. I started calculating. I should have noticed the first red flag when he didn't want to know how I planned to help. He just said, "I trust you," and kissed my forehead like a child being sent off to school. I took a loan against my 401k. I drained the savings account I had built since my early 20s. I didn't tell Ethan exactly where the money came from, because I didn't want him to feel guilty or emasculated. I paid off the remaining $92,000 in one quiet sequence of transfers, watching the balances fall to zero on my laptop late at night while he slept upstairs. I remember the relief I felt when it was done, the sense that I had pulled us back from the edge. I imagined us starting over, less tension, more gratitude, maybe even laughter again. The week after I cleared the debt, Ethan booked a business trip. He said it was a vendor meeting, something about sourcing and expansion ideas. I didn't question it. I was too busy convincing myself that sacrifice was supposed to be invisible. Then the alert started. $3,500, labeled vendor services. Another $3,500 exactly 7 days later. Same description, same timing. I noticed it during a lunch break while scrolling through our joint account, more out of habit than suspicion. I should have noticed the second red flag when I searched the vendor name and nothing came up. When I asked Ethan casually about it, he didn't look surprised. He didn't look concerned either. He said it was part of restructuring, that restaurants ran on relationships I wouldn't understand. He told me Chloe handled some of those details now. Chloe Hart, his hostess. His assistant, depending on the day. He said her name more often than mine. At home, things shifted in subtle ways. He commented on how late I worked, how tired I looked. He suggested I dress lighter, more fun. He said Chloe understood the restaurant grind better than I ever could, said it like an observation, not an accusation. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself debt had changed him, and that now that it was gone, we just needed time. The Bluetooth call came through on a Wednesday evening as I sat in my car outside the grocery store, engine running, phone connected automatically. I heard laughter before I heard his voice. And then I heard my own name, followed by words that rewrote everything I thought I knew. I heard my own name, followed by laughter so casual it took my breath away. Ethan's voice came through the car speakers like he was sitting in my passenger seat. "She thinks she saved us," he said, and Chloe giggled like it was the punchline to a private joke. "She's a walking wallet," Chloe replied. "A really organized one." There was a pause, the faint sound of a turn signal, and then Ethan again. "Just be patient. Once the condo closes, we're done pretending." My hands went cold around the steering wheel. I stared at the grocery store entrance, at a couple arguing over a shopping cart like the world was normal. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The only thing I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears and the casual way my marriage was being narrated like a con. I should have noticed the third red flag months earlier, when Ethan stopped saying we and started saying I whenever he talked about the future. The Bluetooth disconnected suddenly, like the car itself had mercy. The screen went silent. I sat there for a long time, long enough for the engine to idle down and the dashboard lights to dim. Then I did the only thing I knew how to do when my emotions threatened to swallow me. I went home and started collecting data. The next morning was Thursday, May 9, and I remember the date because it was the first day I stopped asking Ethan questions and started documenting his answers. At work, I moved through my open-plan office like everything was fine, smiled at coworkers in the break room, listened to gossip about a manager's messy divorce, and felt something inside me harden into focus. At lunch, I pulled our joint account activity. 2 transfers, each for $3,500, each labeled vendor services. The recipient was not a vendor. It was a personal account under the name Chloe Hart. I stared at her name on the screen until it stopped looking like letters and started looking like a weapon. I downloaded statements. I saved PDFs. I took screenshots with timestamps visible. I created a folder in my work cloud drive labeled Quarterly Budget and nested everything inside it. No one ever questions a woman who is always organized. At home, Ethan acted like a man who'd just been given oxygen. He walked lighter. He started humming while he brushed his teeth. And then, like he was testing how far he could push me, he began rewriting the story out loud. "You're always stressed, Sarah," he said one night as we ate dinner at the kitchen island. "You're always tired. Chloe and I were talking about how restaurant life changes you. It's intense. It makes you sharper." The way he said Chloe and I felt intentional, like he wanted me to flinch. I didn't flinch. I nodded and asked if he wanted more rice. I watched his eyes scan my face, searching for a reaction he didn't get. 2 days later, he brought home flowers. Not grocery store flowers, but an expensive arrangement in a tall glass vase. He kissed me longer than usual, held my waist like he'd missed it. "I've been horrible," he said. "I'm sorry. I've been so lost in the restaurant. I want us to start over." False hope is the cruelest kind because it feels like relief at first. That night, he booked a reservation at a rooftop restaurant downtown and posted a photo of our drinks on his story. He tagged me. He hadn't tagged me in months. He held my hand in public like he was trying to convince someone else we were real. I should have noticed the 4th red flag when he kept checking his phone under the table, smiling at messages he didn't share. The next morning, another bank alert hit my phone. Not $3,500 this time. $22,000 moved from our joint savings into an account labeled Business Emergency Fund. I logged in immediately. The account existed, but I couldn't open it. No transaction history, no details. Just a new balance page that treated me like a stranger. When Ethan came home that evening, I asked him once, carefully, like a wife who still believed there might be an innocent explanation. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize either. "I had to," he said. "You don't understand how fragile this is. I need control of emergency cash without you questioning every move." He said control like it was his birthright. I went upstairs after he fell asleep and opened my laptop again. I pulled his email from the shared iPad we kept in the living room. The one he forgot was still connected. I searched for the words refinance, loan, condo, and Chloe. The results loaded slowly. And the first email I saw was an approval notice with an attachment titled Closing Disclosure. I should have noticed the 5th red flag when my hands didn't shake as I opened the attachment. The closing disclosure was dated April 22, 3 weeks before Ethan told me the restaurant debt was finally crushing him. 3 weeks before I drained my savings to save us. The document was clean, professionally formatted, and devastating in its simplicity. The restaurant had been refinanced, not paid off, expanded, a larger loan, better terms, longer runway, and my payoff money wasn't listed as a payment. It was listed as collateral. I sat on the edge of our bed, the house silent except for the hum of the air conditioner, and read the document 3 times. The numbers were unmistakable. The lender, the loan amount, Ethan's signature. Chloe Hart listed as an interested party under administrative management. My chest felt hollow, like something essential had been removed without anesthesia. I should have noticed how carefully he'd avoided details when I told him the debt was gone. The condo came next. I didn't have to dig far. Chloe's social media was a catalog of ambition disguised as aesthetic minimalism. On June 3, she posted a photo on her private account that someone had reshared publicly. A glass-walled living room. City lights. Caption, New Beginnings. I zoomed in on the corner of the image where a folder sat on the marble counter. The logo of a Denver title company was faint but visible. I cross-referenced it with recent transactions in our area. The down payment amount matched the missing funds from our joint savings exactly. $22,000. I felt something in me click into place then. Not anger. Not grief. Recognition. This wasn't an affair that happened to include money. This was a financial strategy that happened to include a wife. I kept pretending. That was the hardest part. I smiled. I made dinner. I asked about his day. I let him complain about the pressure, about how much he carried alone. I watched him rehearse the role of the misunderstood man. At work, my manager Linda called me into her office for a routine check-in. She asked how things were going at home. I almost laughed at how gently she phrased it, like she already knew the answer. "You're allowed to have boundaries," she said quietly when I didn't respond right away. "Even with people you love. Especially with money." 2 days later, Ethan escalated. He showed up at my office just before lunch, carrying a manila envelope like a prop. People glanced up from their monitors. Someone from HR smiled politely. Ethan asked for a conference room, said it was personal. He slid the papers across the table with practiced calm. Divorce petition. Allegations of financial control. A request for spousal support. The audacity of it landed like a physical blow. I should have noticed how prepared he was. "I think this is best," he said. "You've always wanted to manage everything. This way you can manage yourself." I walked back to my desk after he left. My coworkers pretended not to stare. My hands were steady as I sat down. That was when I opened the spreadsheet I'd started weeks earlier and renamed the file. Miller v. Miller. That afternoon, I met attorney Daniel Brooks in a quiet office near Civic Center Park. He listened without interrupting, flipping through the documents I'd printed, the bank statements, the refinance disclosures, the screenshots. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and nodded once. "You didn't lose control," he said. "You were excluded from it, and that's fraud." He explained marital waste, misrepresentation, liability. He told me Chloe would have to testify. He told me Ethan had built his new life on paper-thin lies. For the first time in months, I slept without waking up in panic. A week later, Daniel filed first. And when the subpoenas went out to the restaurant's banks, the condo's lender, and the IRS, Ethan called me 42 times in one night. I didn't answer. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a single text from an unknown number. It was Chloe. She wrote, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." I didn't respond to Chloe's message. Misunderstandings are accidents. What she and Ethan built was deliberate. The court date came faster than Ethan expected. That was the thing about paperwork. Once it started moving, it didn't care about charm or excuses. It cared about timelines, signatures, and numbers that had nowhere left to hide. On the day of the hearing, I sat quietly beside Daniel in a wood-paneled courtroom downtown, my hands folded, my posture calm. Ethan sat across from me, pale and restless, his confidence evaporating under fluorescent lights. Chloe arrived late. She wore a fitted blazer and heels she kept adjusting, like the ground itself had betrayed her. When she was sworn in, her voice wavered just enough to make the judge look up. Daniel walked her through the transfers slowly. The $3,500 payments, the personal account, the condo down payment. Each question landed with precision, each answer tightening the net. She tried to say she didn't know the money was marital. She tried to say Ethan handled everything. Then Daniel introduced the refinance documents and asked her to read her own name aloud. The room went very still. Ethan didn't look at me. He stared at the table, at his hands, at anything except the consequences sitting across from him. The judge asked questions next. Direct ones, the kind that don't invite stories. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice cracked under the weight of facts he couldn't charm away. The ruling came 2 weeks later. I was awarded the house. Full restitution for the $92,000 I paid. My remaining retirement accounts were protected. The condo was ordered sold. The proceeds went to repay marital losses and outstanding taxes. The restaurant's books were flagged, and an audit followed swiftly after. Suppliers pulled out. Lines of credit vanished. Chloe disappeared before the sale finalized. Ethan called once after that, left a voicemail I never listened to. I didn't need to hear it. His life had become exactly what he feared most: exposed, unstable, entirely his responsibility. At work, a few months later, Linda called me into her office again. This time, it wasn't concern in her eyes. It was respect. I'd helped uncover a fraud pattern in a company case by recognizing the same tactics I'd lived through. The promotion came with a new title, a corner office, and something I hadn't expected: peace. I started a small side business after that. Financial self-defense workshops, nothing flashy. Just teaching women how to read statements, protect themselves, and trust their instincts before the damage was done. People sometimes ask if what I did was revenge. It wasn't. Revenge is loud and emotional. Justice is quiet, methodical, and final. I didn't take anything that wasn't already mine. I simply stopped funding a life that excluded me. I used to think love meant sacrifice without limits. Now I know better. Love should never require you to disappear.